Welcome back to another episode of the Alarmists Conspiracy Theories and Coffee. But today I have no coffee. I'm sorry. But I'm still full of energy, and we have an amazing guest today, Jeffrey Gurian. Now, we all know Jeffrey Gurian as the comedy master. He has Comedy Matters. He's written for some of the greatest comedians out there, legends. But Jeffrey is also, I guess you would say, a spiritual healer, someone who really understands the human psyche and how to make people feel the best that they can feel. I guess you could say that his comedy is an extension of that. And let me introduce Jeffrey Gurian. We're going to get into some spirituality here today, ladies and gentlemen. Jeffrey Gurian, take the microphone, my friend. Hi.
Hi, thanks so much. You know, that was a great introduction. It really was, and I really appreciate it. It's the other side of my life. The other side. But I do bring comedy into it. I think it's important. It's all about positive energy, and you know that so well.
Laughter, food for the soul, you know?
Absolutely. Especially in these times with this pandemic, people are surrounded by insecurity and fear. And that's why I write the things that I write. You know, when I got out of the hospital in March, I had COVID double pneumonia. And it was, to say the least, it was a very tense time. It was when New York was the epicenter of the virus and the hospitals were overrun. They were putting people in the hallways already. And I was sick for 2 weeks before I called an ambulance. I couldn't take it anymore. The pain was too great. And
does this experience make you sort of, take a second look at your life, give you yourself sort of a personal checklist of maybe things that you weren't taking as seriously as you should, or things that maybe you were taking for granted? What's happened, to you since then?
Well, you know what? Interestingly enough, it didn't. I try to live a life of gratitude every day, that I'm always grateful for the things that I have. But it allowed me to walk the walk, not just talk the talk. Okay? Because there's a really big difference. Anybody can write about stuff and espouse certain principles, but having to use them in your life is a whole different.
Can you shut your phone off because it's beeping every 5 minutes?
It's not my phone. It's email, and I don't know how to stop that sound. Do you know? I've never been able to stop that sound. It's not my phone. I know. I feel terrible, but
I feel like I'm. It's worse than water torture.
I get a lot of spam emails too.
Right, I'll ignore it.
Not important.
You're called a Renaissance man, and that's a very. Who gave you that title?
I don't remember the first person, but people have been saying that for a while because I have a lot of interests. I've managed to do a lot of things in a lot of different fields. The point that I wanted to make was, when I was in the hospital, they put me, the first couple of days I was in isolation. Third and fourth day, they put me in a room with 3 other very sick men. And I don't know if they were kidding, but they told me that the guy in the bed next to me was from Wuhan, China. They all had the virus.
How considerate of them.
Right.
What a gift.
What a gift that was. And he didn't speak English. And he was coughing and choking into the air, and I'm laying right next to the guy. And I had to take control of my mind, because the obvious thing was to go to a negative space. Like, why is this happening to me? Of all people in the world, I wind up next to a guy from Wuhan, China. The only thing worse was if they had
comedy. It could be a comedy bit,
if they had served me a bat to share with the guy, it would have been perfect. So I had to take control of my mind, because I know that when you're in a negative space, your immune system is not functioning as well, and your vibratory level drops. When you're in a positive space, your immune system functions better. And I had to start not feeling sorry for myself and step outside of myself. And I was actually joking with the nurses. I asked them if they could move me, and they said there was no other place to put me, because they were out of space. But they said, don't worry, because there's a curtain between you. And I said, yeah.
How comforting.
I said, yeah, because everybody knows if you want to protect yourself from a deadly virus, you hang a very thin curtain.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. That's the answer to the whole thing, is a thin curtain. Why didn't I realize that?
Yeah,
So,
Dr. Fauci endorses this, I'm sure.
I'm sure. I'm sure. So, always,
And Trump too,
always
And
bring a thin curtain
he
with you.
probably was injecting Clorox as he was endorsing the curtain.
Well, while I was in the emergency room, they put me next to a woman who was screaming, literally screaming with every exhalation. And, there's a tendency to ask yourself, why me? Why is this happening to me right now? But the spiritual answer is, why not me? Whoever promised you that your life is supposed to be perfect and nothing so-called bad was ever supposed to happen, right? So I had to step outside myself and think of how much pain she must be in and how scared she must be to be in a state where she was literally screaming with every exhalation. Every time she breathed out was a scream. And I'm laying right next to her. And I'm like, what's the lesson here? So I had to tell myself, this is my path. For whatever reason, I have to deal with this. You can't only believe in certain principles when it feels like your life is going great. It's when it feels like nothing is going right that these
All right,
principles.
so let me interrupt. What changed in you? What was the Jeffrey Gurian before you got COVID, and now the Jeffrey Gurian who's gone through this trip to hell and back?
It's a subtle change. A lot of people will say, well, now I'm grateful for every day. But the point I'm trying to make was I always was grateful. I try to lead a life of gratitude and service. What it did for me was it made me appreciate things even more. My phone was off the hook, and now it even rang, and I don't understand what's going on.
Your spirituality is definitely, maybe you're getting some visitors.
It could be. But you know what? In the months that I've been home, I was sick for 2 months. And after that, I wanted to try to use my time so that I didn't feel like I was wasting time. And I wrote 2 books, actually. I published one of them. The
Healing
second,
your heart by changing your mind.
A Spiritual and Humorous Approach to Achieving Happiness. That was the first book, Jess. The book I wrote in quarantine was Fight the Fear, Overcoming Obstacles That Stand in Your Way.
That's out now, right?
That's on now. It came out about 6 weeks ago, and it hit as a number 1 release in categories like medicine and psychology, cognitive behavioral therapy, group therapy, and even adult children of alcoholics. It came out number 1 in many.
What I love about this title, is it's not, it's a commonality that we all go through. I mean, at some point in most of our lives, I wouldn't say everybody, but a big portion of us, we're blocking ourselves from achieving that success or getting to that next level in our lives. And it's always based in fear. We don't know how the fear started. Sometimes it's in childhood, sometimes it's in the womb. There are many explanations. So I love the fact that you are putting this out there for people to understand.
Thank you. I mean, I've been battling fear all my life for whatever reason. I came from a very loving and supportive family, but I was given every fear known to man.
And what do you think? How do you think that happened?
I'm not sure. Well, I know one thing.
It's hard to believe that you used to stutter. I know you for 30 years, and I would have never known that unless you've talked about it. And I find that pretty remarkable that you've overcome that.
Thank you. And it's one of the things I do as an avocation. I work with stutterers all over the world to teach them my techniques of how not to stutter. It took me many years to cure myself, and it was the power of thought. Because I realized one day I didn't stutter when I was alone. I only stuttered when I was trying to talk to somebody else. And I consider that grace. I was given the grace to understand you can't have a disability based on your location. If a man has a limp, right? If a man has a limp, he limps in every room of his house. He can't go into a room and close the door and walk perfectly. It's a true.
It tells you that your stuttering was more psychological
and emotional. I brought it,
of course.
And very often those things are a form of self-sabotage and fear of doing too well, fear of being successful. The fear of failure and fear of success are very close. It's a very thin line. And so wherever this came from, I had these fears. I was nervous. My mother kept me in a crib till I was 6.5 years old. That sounds.
Get the fuck out of here.
I swear to God. My sister was finally born So I got out of the crib. I used to say to
you had to make room. What were you
my
living?
mother put me in a crib till I was 6.5.
How did your mother explain this to you? Jeffrey, we had no money. We couldn't afford a bed.
I remember that my grandfather bought me my first two-wheeler, and I climbed out of my crib to get on the bike. I was 6.5 years old as a big kid to be in a crib. But so I think I was overprotected, and that gave me a lot of fears. It gave me a lot of fears. And I always confronted my fear. Like I was afraid of the dark as a kid, and I made myself go in the dark because I confronted my fear. As a stutterer, I made myself run for the president of my college, of the freshman class. And I told myself if I could win the election, I wouldn't have to stutter anymore because it would tell me that people liked me. And I won the election, and I was the president of the freshman class of Hunter College. And I still stuttered, and it was a great lesson for me because it taught me that outside validation doesn't work in life. It doesn't matter how many people compliment you and tell you you're fantastic and wonderful. It matters what you think of yourself. So I worked on myself for many years to build up self-confidence and self-esteem. And that's how I was able to cure myself. And I had to do that through dental school because I was very poor. I was mistreated in dental school so badly that I was bullied on a daily basis. I grew a mustache and I grew sideburns, and I was banned from the school. I wasn't allowed to see patients for 3 weeks by an instructor who had a Confederate flag in his office and a sign that said, "The South will rise again."
You're fucking kidding. This guy's allowed to continue teaching, and because you grew some facial hair, he threw you off the campus. That is pretty messed up.
These days, it would never be allowed. But in those days, if you wore a turtleneck sweater in Philadelphia, you were considered a radical. They thought you were like one of the Rolling Stones or something like that. So I was banned. I was told that I was a disgrace to the profession. I was banned from school for 3 weeks. My father came down. They wouldn't even let me work on my father for something as stupid as having a mustache and sideburns. Meanwhile, the founders of the school all had beards and mustaches and sideburns. So the weird part about this story is I was bullied from day one until my 4th year. My mother had to get me a wig to wear to school, believe it or not, a flat wig with a part.
You, with that hair? You had to wear a wig?
Wig. They didn't know that it was a wig.
Moron.
They didn't know that it was a wig. So listen to this.
Oh my
this
God.
Last January, I get an email from the dean of the same dental school. He wasn't the dean when I went there. He read about me on the internet. His secretary contacted me and said, "The dean would like to take you out to lunch." And I was very averse. I have such bad memories of that school that I wanted nothing to do with it. And I thought he was going to ask me for a donation. But I agreed because I confront my fear. I agreed to meet with him. And he came to New York.
To lunch?
Well, listen, so he came to New York from Philadelphia with another dean, and they took me out to this beautiful lunch. And I said to myself, this is an opportunity for me to tell him how badly I was treated, right? And I'm going to bring books of my before and after pictures, and I'm going to show him what a good dentist I was because I was a cosmetic specialist. And I'm going to tell him this story. I start to tell him the story, and he interrupts me, and he says to me, those doctors were racist and anti-Semites, and they ruined the school. Wow. And he apologized. He said it. And I said to him, thank you so much for saying that, because that was on my mind all these years, that they singled me out and they punished me and they tried to make me drop out of school.
You got validation for everything.
Well, he gave me validation, and I wouldn't say it was closure. It was a sort of closure. But in my first book, Healing Your Heart by Changing Your Mind, these are the heart wounds that we carry. When people hurt us and when they insult you, you never forget that. It stays with you. You know that stupid saying they teach us when you're kids, sticks and stones will break your bones, but words will never harm you, is the furthest from the truth. Because all the bruises you got as a kid healed up a long time ago. But every single one of us can remember something that someone said to us that hurt our feelings or insulted us.
Oh, like we used to toss around phraseologies like, how many mothers said to their kid when they got frustrated, I wish you were never born, or exactly. I wish you were dead.
Right. Well, those things stay with you. So these insults, these pains stayed with me because I had never been treated that way in my life. So what happened as a result of this meeting, at the end of the meeting, the dean says to me, "Can I give you a hug?" And I said, "Absolutely." And I have pictures of me with these two deans, which is such a funny picture because we don't look anything alike, as you could imagine. And so he said to me, "I want to send a car for you. I want you to come to Philadelphia. I want to give you a tour of the school, and I want you to lecture to the students and tell them what happened to you and what your experience was like, because we've totally changed the culture of the school."
How cathartic. How cathartic.
Yeah, but listen to this. It gets even better. The pandemic happened. I got sick. I wasn't able to go. Last week, this past Wednesday, I finished a lecture series. He hired me to lecture to the doctors on how to change a thought, not about dentistry, but how to change thinking from frustrating to enjoyable and from hate to love. And I did 4 weeks of lectures with the doctors and the alumni, which that to me is amazing. I could have never imagined anything like that in my life. 4-hour lectures. And now he just contacted me. He wants me to do a comedy show for the doctors for Christmas. So we're doing a Zoom call on Wednesday to plan this out. I think that's the most amazing thing, to go from
what I love is that you will be knocked down, but you will always stand up again, and that you have this tenacity about you. And maybe it's the humor that you've tapped into that keeps you going. I don't know what it is, but every time I talk to you, you have another addendum to your life that has to do with spirituality. And I find that uplifting, so that people who are watching the show today can hear you talk about the challenges that you've had and how you didn't let it defeat you. And I think that's so important, because right now, man, if we have had more challenges in our society than ever before, this is the year. 2020 can go take a hike. I mean, it's been I would think the worst year for so many people for, the obvious reasons, and then there are the emotional ones.
Well, let me say this, Jess. That's the subtitle of the new book: Overcoming Obstacles That Stand in Your Way. You never let an obstacle stand in your way. You can either crumble or you can call on your inner strength to overcome it. So I fight my uncomfortability on a daily basis. And this is a message that I want to bring to people. That's why I wrote, if you don't mind, I'm going to hold it up: Fight the Fear, Overcoming Obstacles That Stand in Your Way. And it's about all the things that I've had to overcome. I challenged myself. Last October, I went to Japan all by myself because I have a fear of traveling. And I couldn't think of anything scary.
Japan by yourself.
By myself for 2 weeks.
Talk about a culture that's completely
foreign
to you.
Nothing like ours. I studied Japanese. I took level 1 3 times. It helped me a bit. But I'm telling you, I was lost every day in Japan. It's a very difficult country to travel in. They admit they have the most complicated subway system in the world. I took the subway every day. I went to different cities. I went from Tokyo to Kyoto to Osaka. I challenged myself literally on a daily basis. A typhoon hit Tokyo the day I left and went to Kyoto. I did everything that made me nervous, and I survived. I was
How
lost.
long did you stay there for?
2 weeks. And I used all the Japanese that I learned. People there do not speak English. They tell you, "Oh, don't worry, everybody speaks English." In the hotels, they speak English. But getting around in the subways, you're on your own. And let me tell you something. It was the biggest challenge I ever gave myself. I went to Europe alone twice as a challenge some years ago. But this was, excuse me, this was the most amazing challenge for me.
No, Japanese is a complicated culture. As a journalist and as a syndicator, I worked with a Japanese agent, and I'm telling you, the toughest culture to navigate.
But
there's a sense of pride, which is total bullshit. They like to walk around high and mighty in their culture, and they have the sense of pride, but there's a complicated subculture that sort of is almost hypocritical in the way, a lot of times, the way they deal with things. This is in business.
Well,
I don't know about, the personal
there's a real dichotomy because they're very conservative in the way they act, and like all the men dressed the same way. These salary men, they walk in the street, 20 men, all dressed alike, and very conservative, but they have the craziest porn all over the place. But very, very kind. 5 different times, strangers left where they were going to physically take me to where I was going so that I wouldn't get lost. All I did was ask directions. They left where they were going. They were going in a different direction, and they actually took me there. That would never happen here. Yet
I could see the subtitles. Oh my God, it's that Comedy Matters guy from the United States. God forbid he gets lost.
I performed. I did 2 shows while I was there, and a guy came over to me. He said he was a big fan of mine from the Black Phillip Show, a show that I co-hosted with Patrice O'Neill, the legendary comedian Patrice O'Neill. I was his co-host, and this guy in Japan knew the show. He goes, "I'm so excited to meet you." I couldn't believe I had a fan in Japan, which was
that actually saw that show. It's pretty funny.
But what's crazy, they're so polite, yet they don't stand up for elderly people on the subway. There was an old woman who got on. No one stood up to give her a seat.
Why do you think that is? That's horrible.
I couldn't believe it. It's a very strange dichotomy because everyone's bowing and they're so kind and so polite.
Did you ask anybody? Did you ask anyone why they don't stand?
No, it was just something that stuck with me. I saw it a few times that elderly people would get on and no one would get up to give them a seat. And I thought it was really, really strange. But I had a really good time, but I look at it as an experience, as a challenge. So I challenged myself. When I wanted to start performing comedy, I had to overcome the fear of going on stage. I had to conquer stuttering. When I had a heart attack, 5 years ago, I had a serious heart attack. They call it a widowmaker heart attack. And I was back on stage in 5 days. And the owner of the club said to me, "What, are you crazy? You just had a heart attack." And I was like, "Yeah, but it's hard to get a spot here. I don't want to lose my spot." He couldn't believe it because when I left the hospital, it was surreal. I had never been sick in my life. And all of a sudden, in the middle of the day, I get this heart attack. And they said to me, "Try and act like it never happened. Just go and lead your life." So I get out of the hospital. I come home. I'm like, what are you supposed to do? How are you supposed to act when they tell you just had a serious heart attack? They put a stent in my heart. I didn't know what to do. So I tried to lead my life. I try to use this positive thinking, which again is a point that I'm glad you let me bring out. That's the key to everything. Your subconscious mind does not know the difference between fact and fiction. It believes whatever you tell it. If you tell your subconscious mind that you're a loser, then that's what you're going to draw into your life. If you have a negative worldview, if you're living in a sense of a state of depression, then you're going to find that negative things happen to you because we tend to draw into our lives. We manifest our worst fears, basically.
I'll just say this. I'll say something that you should say every day, and everybody watching this show should say every day because it's true. What you think about, you bring about.
Well, that's why a lot of cancer phobes wind up getting cancer because they actually, so much of their energy is devoted to thinking about cancer. You can actually draw that kind of stuff into your life. You have to
believe that you can create illness inside you.
You have to be very careful. You have to be very careful what you think about and how you direct your energy. So
I was reading some history of you, and I wanted you to touch on, you created a type of therapy called star therapy. Talk and touch. Explain what that is, because I found that very, very interesting.
Thank you. That was my final lecture to the doctors from Temple University. STAR stands for Spiritual, Transformational, Affirmative Resonance Therapy. When people are emotionally upset, and I should say, I'm on the board of the Association for Spirituality and Psychotherapy for 20 years. And I approach them. These are classically trained psychotherapists, except for me. That's not my training. But I approach them with my work. A lot of people who are depressed and have emotional illness get physical symptoms similar to migraine headaches, neck pain, back pain. When they wake up in the morning, their neck is stiff and achy. They get bad headaches. They get a lot of physical pain from stress. And a lot of times it's caused by clenching and grinding the teeth. And most dentists, unfortunately, a lot of dentists don't check for it, and most MDs don't know anything about it. And it causes such pain that people can become suicidal. I've had that experience. When I taught at NYU, I was a clinical professor in oral medicine and orofacial pain, and that was my specialty. So I developed this technique of using your hands to take away headaches.
How do you do that? Show us.
Well, there's no one here to show you on. But
you can't do it to yourself?
No, not really. It's a way of manipulating the muscles and relaxing the muscles of the head. Like, have you ever had a cramp in your calf? You know how painful
all
it
the
is?
time. That's because I don't drink enough water.
So the calf is a fleshy muscle, and you know when it goes into spasm because it tightens up and it's very painful. Your head feels like it's bone. It's bone, but it's covered by a very thin layer of muscle. And when those muscles are stressed because you're clenching and grinding your teeth, you're putting stress in the temporal muscles, in the occipital muscles, which are behind your head, and even in the trapezius muscles, which is around your neck. Those muscles are actually affected by your jaw, and most people don't know that. So when you're overusing your jaw to clench and grind your teeth, those muscles go into spasm. When the muscles in your head go into spasm, they close up on the nerves and on the blood vessels that are inside of those muscles. And that's where the pounding headaches come from. If you could picture in your mind a long balloon, you know those balloons they use to make animals out of?
Yeah, the balloon animals. Yeah.
Right. So if you filled one of those with water and you squeezed it in the middle, the water would shoot out to either side. Right. That's basically what happens in your head. And that's where people get these terrible headaches from. So I developed this technique. I believe that people can transfer energy. And on a very simple level, if you've ever been upset and someone that you care about gave you a hug and you felt better afterwards, it's because you allowed them to transfer positive energy to you.
You believe in transference.
And you were open to receiving it. Exactly. Right? Well, all people could do that for each other, but we don't walk around hugging strangers. But when people come to a doctor, you can use touch. I'm not saying hug your patients, although a lot of my patients would hug me when they were done. There's an energy from your hands that you can use to release the muscles that are in spasm so that you don't have to give people drugs or injections. It's what we call a body, mind, spirit approach.
But the problem now in today's society now, you can touch somebody and then it can be misconstrued or manipulated.
I'm not talking about that. Let me finish the statement. A body, mind, spirit approach means that when people are emotionally ill, they're very often living in the past. They're thinking what they should have done, what they could have done, what they should have said in a certain situation, and they're worrying about the future. What's going to happen to me? And they're losing the now. They're not staying in the present. And so when you're dealing with somebody like that, it's not enough to give them pills or to have them see a psychiatrist. You have to get to the root cause of what's happening in their life that is giving them these symptoms. And that's a lengthy process. And that's part of STAR therapy. So the R stands for resonance, which is music that I use when I play. When I do this procedure, I use music. It refers to my voice because I talk the whole time I'm doing it. But mostly what's most important, and you'll get this, is it refers to a truth. If I say something to you that you need to hear, it'll resonate inside of you as a truth. And when people are emotionally disturbed, they need new thoughts. You can't get better with the same mind that got you sick. You already know your thoughts. And if your thoughts are not working for you, you need new thoughts. The new thoughts are spiritual wisdom, a different way of looking at things. So you can't change your past. The only thing you could change is your perspective of your past. And that's what I write about. And that's what healing your heart is about letting go of the heart wounds, the pains that people have caused us, allowing you to think in a different way.
It's not. How did you get this revelation that, when did you realize this and then to put it into a book? Not everybody, people go their whole lives and never get it. How did you get it?
Exactly. Well, how I got it, it's such an interesting question. It's been a lifelong process. Since I cured myself of stuttering, I've been fascinated by the power of thought. My work has been validated by psychiatrists and psychologists who gave me 5-star reviews on the books one psychiatrist said to me, "How did you even learn this? You say everything that we know, but you use different words," because I speak in layman's terms. A lot of it has been given to me intuitively. It's a gift in a sense that I have this knowledge and it makes sense to the people in that field.
Well, the fact that you recognize it, we all have these deficiencies, but to recognize it is the first level of being able to heal.
Exactly. You have to know that you have a problem in order to get better.
Exactly.
And like I just did a show last week, a Harvard-trained psychiatrist who has a radio show. Now, these people could challenge me because my training is not their training. But rather than challenge me, he said, "Your stuff is amazing. I'd like to do more things with you," because he understood exactly what I was saying. He said, everything you're saying is right on the button. And so these are things that I had to use to help myself with my thinking. And the fact that like they had me lecture to the doctors at Temple University is even more validation. When I taught at NYU, they had me lecture to the doctors after seeing me do this. If I just walked into a university and said, "I think you should do energy work with your hands," they'd think I was a lunatic. They wouldn't even talk to me. But because I was on staff for 12 years, they saw me doing this on patients. They saw me taking away headaches from people and taking away facial pain just by using my hands. So the head of the TMJ department invited me to lecture to his doctors, to his postgraduate students. And so I've gotten a lot of validation. How I get the information, I couldn't tell you exactly. A lot of it is intuitive. I'm an empath. So I feel what other people feel. There was a time in my life, if I was with you and you were sad, I was sadder for you than you were, Jess. I overfelt my feelings. So I had to learn to use that sensitivity, which often feels like a weakness, as a strength, because most men don't want to talk about being sensitive. Men in general think of sensitivity as a weakness. A lot of guys don't want to cop to being sensitive. But when I work with people, especially stutterers, and I teach them to own their sensitivity, so many men come back to me and say, "You know what? I didn't even realize how sensitive I was." And I'm like, well, don't shrink away from that. It's okay. Because if the world was more sensitive, we would be kinder to people. It would be a much kinder world if people understood and accepted their sensitivity. And
Jeffrey Gurian,
yes,
you are doing very good things, man. We have to wrap this up. Tell the people, the viewers, where they can buy the books. Give us some information.
Yes, thank you, Jess. They're both available on Amazon. Healing Your Heart by Changing Your Mind. You can see a meditation on the cover, and it's available as an ebook, as a paperback, and as an audiobook. Fight the Fear, that just came out, is available as an ebook and a paperback, and they're both on Amazon. And you can read more about it on my website, which is comedymatterstv.com. Feel free to ignore the show business stuff if you just want to look about the spirituality. There's a separate thing. And for anybody who's listening, who knows anybody who stutters, I have a special website for that. It's called StopStutteringNowGurian.com. Gurian, N as in Nancy. StopStutteringNowGurian.com is a website dedicated to stuttering and to people who stutter who would like to have some help, because nobody's putting out the message that you can get better. And
Are you going to be lecturing anytime soon? Can people come and hear you speak?
Yeah, I'm lecturing again. Well, I just finished the temple, but that was closed. It's not for the public.
Right. Any place where they can come and hear you?
Not that I know of right now, but I will let you know, and people can contact you. I'm sure that you'll put up the information when you put up this thing.
Yeah, if anything, in the next couple of weeks, if you find out that you're going to be speaking somewhere, that would be great for people to come and actually hear you.
Thank you. I'm doing a new conference. I just did 2 conferences. I was asked to speak at Awakening Joy conference. They chose 25 people from all around the world, and I was blessed to be one of those people. And then there was a second conference also on thought that I just did. For some reason, I'm blanking on the name. But I have a third one that's coming up. So when I get the details, I'll let you know.
Send them to me. Jeffrey, thank you for coming on. This has been a fascinating experience listening to you talk about this. I knew about some of it, but not all of it. And
as you can see, I can talk for hours, Jess. It's so good to be on with you.
Yeah, it's great to hear. It's great to hear you how you've overcome your challenges and how you found ways to help people get better in all their conflicts and all their fears. We have to conquer our fears, especially now.
Absolutely. And we have to stop the self-sabotage. It wants you to stay in bed and pull the cover over your head, and that's not acceptable. We have to fight the fear. Fear is a bully, and we have to stand up to it. And I thank you so much for allowing me to put this message out to the world.
Thank you, really, Jeffrey. We'll have you on again, and we'll do a part 3. All right?
I hope so. Thanks so much. Be well.
All right, stay well. Okay, bye, man.